Okay, what's up everyone? Thanks for checking into this particular video. I am going to post this live just moments after I finish my debate with Redeemed Zoomer this Friday night, which by the time you're watching this will have already happened, but of course I'm pre-recording this because what I want to do in this particular video is show the receipts for some of the things that I was mentioning in the debate. Now, debates are wonderful structures because both participants have the opportunity to make their opening statements, they can make rebuttals, they can do cross-examination, and then take questions from the audience. So by this time, all of that will have already taken place. However, in my opening statement, because I have so much information that I really want to go through and I only have 20 minutes, I'm going to have to, unfortunately, because of the confines of the rules of the debate, restrict a lot of what I'm saying just so that I can hit my main points. I've got 12 main points or so that I'm going to try to go through, or will have already gone through by the time you watch this. And so much of what I say is going to have to be in very rapid fire style. So what I'd like to do here is simply take my time, slow down, and show you the receipts that I have from the PCUSA's own website and much of their publications that they put forward as a denomination, which I would consider to be highly propagandistic to the extreme even. And for that very reason, I'm going to have to offer a clarifying warning here that if you're a parent, I probably wouldn't watch this video around minors because much of what the PCUSA has on their website is in fact sexually explicit. And so I want you to avoid that if you're listening to this kind of in the background. Maybe you're picking up your kids from school or traveling on vacation or whatever, listening together as a family. If you have minors, again, the PCUSA's website is filled, it is stocked with tawdry and inappropriate information for young people. So I'm going to give you a bit of a warning to maybe watch this later if you have young ones around. Okay, so that's part of the problem right there, is that it's hard as a Christian family to participate in a denomination like the PCUSA because for the most part, it has become one of the world's largest and most aggressive LGBTQIA plus advocacy organizations. It parades to some extent as a Christian denomination, but that's really what it is. It's an LGBTQ aggressive propagandistic organization. And I think that's going to be clear from what we watch here in this particular video. Okay, so what's up? If you're new to this channel, my name's Matthew. I'm one of the pastors at Gospel Fellowship PCA. By the way, the PCA is distinct from the PCUSA, so we do not use those two terms interchangeably, two totally different denominations. That's the substance of the debate that Redeemed Zoomer and I just had. The debate was that the founders of the PCA were wise to leave the mainline church and to start a new Presbyterian denomination, which I argued for and Redeemed Zoomer argued against. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share screen and we're going to slow down a bit and I'm going to take you to and through some of the PCUSA's own propagandistic materials. Now here we have their website. This is the very front page. So what most organizations want to do on their very front page is show you the information that is most immediately relevant to you, the viewer. And so here, this is the picture that they've chosen by which to identify themselves. We have what I take to be three female pastors and perhaps one male here, and they're doing some sort of ministry. And if we scroll down on the very front page of their website, one of the first things we see is this button here, the LGBTQIA plus ministry button. Now that's going to open up a whole Pandora's box of inappropriate materials, which again, I would not watch or view or look at when you're around young children or minors. But notice that they classify this here as trending topics. Okay, now not being sure what's going to happen if I push this particular button. I'm not going to do that right now. I've pre-selected other tabs that I want to take you through just to show you the kinds of materials that you would find in the PCUSA's aggressively propagandistic and overly sexualized website. Okay, so let's suppose I go to the search bar and I put in the phrase LGBTQIA. What I'm going to find is that it has more than 300 links on their website, 329 results with 297 news events that they're going to discuss, at least 5 events and 12 resources. Now, if I begin to just scroll through this, you're going to get a flavor for some of the kinds of materials that the PCUSA puts out there. And you're going to have to ask yourself this question of whether or not a Christian family could abide in a denomination like this. So we've got an LGBTQIA plus bibliography. We have an equity advocacy committee. Now, this actually turns out to be one of their most powerful and most active committees within the PCUSA. It's a relatively new committee, but it is certainly one that is featured prominently throughout their website and their materials. And we can just scroll down here and we can just see event after event, item after item, news article after news article, official statement after official statements. And this is one of the ones that we're going to look at right here. It's a document that they've produced for their denomination called LGBTQIA plus frequently asked questions. Now, if we go to that, what we're going to find here is this. We're going to find a PDF document, which was prepared officially by their Compassion, Peace, and Justice and Theology, Formation, and Evangelism of the PCUSA 2022 is the date here. And the date published is December 2nd of 2022. So if we click View Document here, it's going to open up this PDF for us, and we're going to read things like this. Let me just see if I can highlight this. Nope, I can't highlight. Can I zoom in? How's that? Can you see that a little bit better? I think you can. Being gay is not a sin, it says. How do we know? Sin is a broad theological term. In classical theological anthropology, every human is subject to sin. The PCUSA Book of Confessions addresses this clearly, and the sin is not limited to being gay. I don't know that anybody claimed that. If you were born human, then you are subject to sin. The Westminster Shorter Catechism succinctly defines it: sin is any want of conformity unto or transgression of the law of God. What is the law of God? The law of God is also a broader term, but it can be well abbreviated in the Ten Commandments. Jesus summarized these commandments even more briefly in 2 sentences: love God, love your neighbors. Nowhere in the law of God do we see the hint of being gay as sin. Okay, well, I would certainly challenge that. I would suggest that the very commandments that are just referenced do imply sexual union between a man and a woman, and that other forms of sexual expression are condemned in, for instance, the Levitical law in chapter 18. So unless the book of Leviticus in general and chapter 18 is not part of the law, then I suppose their point stands. But as it is, Leviticus is the law, and Leviticus 18, including sections on homosexuality and other forms of sexual perversion. We continue. Moreover, if we follow the law of God, we are demanded to love our neighbors, including those who are gay. Most of all, this is in dark print here, being the person God created you to be can never be a sin. Your sexual orientation and gender identity are a core part of your being, and thus God made you exactly who you are, and being who God made you is never a sin, so it says. All right. So I would obviously disagree with large swaths of that, as I think most Bible-believing Christians would. And then the rest of this document, which is an official publication of the PCUSA, urges acceptance and advocacy for the LGBTQ cause. Okay. So there's that. Let's move on, unfortunately. Now here, going back to their main website, we're going to find a 3-part video series that the PCUSA has launched to celebrate Pride Month. So it says here, Pride Month video series with corresponding resource pages are rolling out. So this is one thing that the PCUSA is constantly doing, is they're churning out all kinds of materials, blog posts, videos, resources, pamphlets, flyers, newsletters, Sunday school educational material, and so forth. And this is one of their newest forays here, this 3-part video series called Journey to Inclusion. Well, we're not going to watch that, unfortunately, because I don't think it's going to be appropriate. And it's going to contain ideas, concepts, and terminology that I really don't want to more explicitly identify with my YouTube channel here. So let's go on to another item. This is the Unbound series. Unbound is a publication of their social justice efforts within the PCUSA. It says, after a brief hiatus, Unbound, an interactive journal of Christian social justice, published its first edition since the hire of a new managing editor, and so forth. If you read through this and click on the Justice Unbound website, justiceunbound.org, you're going to come to a very, very queer website, which is going to feature all kinds of queer articles and videos, which again, I would argue are not appropriate for young persons. Okay, here, let me take you back to the main page, and we're going to have a discussion on property, because property is actually very relevant in the PCUSA, because if ever a church tries to leave the PCUSA claims that all property is held in trust for the denomination, meaning that either you have to fight your way out through legal means by litigation in the courts, or you have to pay what is sometimes called a ransom fee back to the denomination. These ransom fees can be very exorbitant, $1, $2, $3, $5 million or so, for a church to be able to buy its way out of the PCUSA. Because again, the PCUSA will argue in court that it owns absolutely everything, even the property. Now, why is that important? Because if you're a PCUSA church member, then anytime you give a tithe to the PCUSA, even if that tithe is going to fix a doorknob or a window or put on a new roof or mow the yard or anything related to the property, you end up supporting the PCUSA. And then the PCUSA, when it has churches that buy their way out of the denomination, they end up using those ransom fees to further the propagation of LGBTQIA plus propagandistic materials. Okay, so that's the problem. It's hard to even tithe to your church. If you're a member of a PCUSA church, you have to get into this moral conundrum of, can I even tithe to my church? But also then the opposite side of that is it even moral not to tithe to your church? If you're going to be a covenant member, do you give or do you not give? If you give, it's going to go to the building fund and the maintenance of the property, but the property is owned by the PCUSA, and ultimately that can be used to wield further litigation against the kind of churches that are trying to get out of the PCUSA. Okay, so you can read all about their theology related to church property on their own website. They talk about their legal strategies for how it is that they combat churches that are trying to leave out of the PCUSA. And you can click here on this button, legal, or this button here, constitutional interpretation. And that will take you to some of their authoritative interpretations of how they believe their Book of Church Order works as it relates to fighting over property and so forth. It's sad, I would add, that a church has to have such a refined legal strategy in order to punish churches that try to leave it, but that is nevertheless how the PCUSA wields the power of property to further the LGBTQ plus, abortion-minded, all of this propagandistic material. Okay. Next, let's go have a look at this Unbound material that we referenced earlier. Now, apparently this is a journal. It's not clear to me, at least, whether or not it has any print editions, but nevertheless, it is a sort of an online blog type journal where they have all kinds of articles related to the advocacy of deviant forms of sexuality. Okay, so we're not going to do this forever, but here's just one example of the queering of Job. Job 3, this is an article, I take it, where you can click on this and you can read about how to read the book of Job from a queer perspective. Okay, so that's all through their Unbound. Now, that's not enough though, because we have also a YouTube channel, which is produced by this Unbound intersectional journal. And if you click on the More section right here, then what we see is the description. Unbound speaks to the intersection of faith and justice through publishing a variety of media. Join the Unbound family as we delve into conversations about faith, justice, transformation, action in our communities and world. Unbound is an ecumenical publication and ministry under the PCUSA. Okay, so this is an official ministry of the PCUSA. Again, if you tithe to this denomination, this is what your tithe dollars are supporting. Now, I could pause here to explain one thing about your tithe dollars. Now, you say to yourself, okay, well, doesn't my tithe dollars just go to my local church? Aren't I just supporting my own church, my building, my pastor, our VBS, whatever? Well, to some extent that may be true, but the PCUSA also has something that they call per member or per capita giving, wherein some of the money of your tithe is always going to go upwards in the denomination. Per capita goes up to the presbytery up to the synod, up to the General Assembly, and so forth. And so you end up supporting financially the main offices and their propagandistic endeavors through the PCUSA. So it's really hard to not give to these things if you're giving to the local church. And I say, well, can't I just withhold my per member per capita? Well, there's actually an official interpretation of this that says that it's a breach of trust, covenantal trust, if you don't do this. And even if you as a member don't do it, your church is still going to give upwards. And if your church doesn't give upwards, it's not possible, according to official interpretations, authoritative interpretations, for presbyteries not to give up, and synods and so forth up to the General Assembly. So no matter how you slice it, that money is going to come to the central offices of the PCUSA, which again, I'm arguing here is a LGBTQ plus front advocacy organization. Now let's go back to this, because you're going to be shocked at some of the videos that they have. And again, I just want to remind you that this is actually a ministry under the PCUSA right here. Okay. So this is not some fringe group or some tangentially related organization. This is the PCUSA itself. And when we look at their videos, we're going to see a series of videos called The Queering of Job. We saw that earlier as a blog post. Okay. We have all sorts of videos about changing the narrative about LGBTQIA. We have some videos that look rather benign here, such as these Easter meditations and so forth. Interfaith stories. Let's see here. There's one that I really this one right here. You can watch a video about queering the family. Okay, so how to queer up your family. This is one of their many videos. If we look, just keep on going here. How much do you want to see? Wilderness and rainbows, transfiguration, Ash Wednesday. All right, hard to know what you could trust. Here's something on Black Lives Matter. Here's something on Black Lives Matter 2. Environmental justice, academia and racism. All kinds of stuff here. Reproductive justice. We know what that means. Do we know what reproductive justice is? That's abortion. And the PCUSA is an ardent, aggressive advocate for abortion. So do you want your tithe dollars going to that? I don't. Okay. Divinely queer. Here's another video that you could watch if you're interested in these sorts of things. An immigration, a video on immigration. Voter suppression. One of the things that I'm arguing in my debate with Redeemed Zoomer is that it's indistinguishable to try to discern the difference between the PCUSA's official positions on social justice and the exact planks of the platform of the Democratic Party, the same Democratic Party that's led by Kamala Harris and AOC and so forth. There isn't much of a difference in terms of their views of social justice. In fact, I can't think. I'm going to ask Redeemed Zoomer this. Well, I've already asked him if I got to it in the debate because it already happened by the time you're watching this. Is there anything that is distinguishable between the PCUSA's official policies on social justice and that of the Democratic Party? I would answer no, that's not the case. I don't find anything that's different there. Going back to, let me see, I want to go back to this right here. I didn't pull this up, but if you go back and just search queer or search LGBTQ, there was an article, I wish I could find it right now. I can't find it, but you can see this just goes on and on and on and on and on, this advocacy for queer stuff. There was an article that they had about the idolatry of the nuclear family. Okay, I'm going to have to search that one up for you. The idolatry of the nuclear family. Okay, but let's go back to YouTube here and let's go, shall we, to the PCUSA's official page. All right, so here's the Presbyterian Church in America's official YouTube channel. And here we have a video called Summer Camp for LGBTQIA Youth. Now, what you're going to see here, I've got the audio off.
Is fully inclusive of trans and non-binary campers, where they can come into a space and not have to make a decision about where they're sleeping or where they use the restroom, not have to make a decision about a lot of things that the world asks them to decide, right? It's a way to create a space that says you can come and just be, and you can be a kid knowing that in a world that is not designed for you, this is a space that we have taken.
All right, let's pause it right there. That's probably a topically appropriate place to pause this video. I would love to ask Redeemed Zoomer, and perhaps I already did in the debate, whether or not he would use PCUSA videos if he was the youth pastor or the youth director. Would he allow his own children to watch this kind of video, where basically what they're doing is they're recruiting for your kids to come to a camp, and they're going to hear all of this sort of indoctrination related to transgenderism and homosexuality and queerism and polyamory and so forth. I would be terrified to let my kids go to a camp like this, much less even watch the introductory video for it. But nevertheless, we must hasten on. Now, as to social justice advocacy, we have here a little bit of an advertisement for the 227th General Assembly of the PCUSA, which is coming up shortly. That's next year. Now, the PCUSA only has General Assembly every other year. They don't have it every year. They can't do that, so they do it every other year. Let's see what they say. A key day of the 227th General Assembly will be spent out in the community. Well, what do you think they're going to do? Let's find out here. Okay, an innovation in store during the 227th General Assembly, which will be held online and at the Baird Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, June 23rd through July 2nd, 2026, will be a community day planned for Saturday, June 27th. According to Kate, so forth, it's added to the docket, blah, blah, blah. Let's see what it says here. Basically, what they're doing is they're going, here it is. A community day, a march, a protest, perhaps an educational gathering related to ending cash bail for criminals. Okay? An event like Community Day hasn't been held since the 223rd General Assembly in St. Louis, when Presbyterians marched to end cash bail and raised more than $47,000 to bail people charged with misdemeanors. Now that's interesting, because every time there's these sort of city riots that take place, you have these organizations which end up bailing people out of jail. Now, I don't know exactly what they're planning to do with this End Cash Bail March, but certainly they're against the idea that criminals, even those having misdemeanors, that they'd have to pay some kind of a bail in order to get out of jail or prison or however it is. But nevertheless, they're going to march in that effect. So they're going to try to have this march for the advocacy of removing cash bail. Interesting. Okay. Now, if we move to reproductive rights on their website, what we're going to find is a series of articles that argue against the pro-life, or what we might call the abolitionist position, and for the position of aggressive abortion advocacy. And again, if we just look here, we have over 200 results on their website, 168 news items, 7 resources. And you can take the time to go through all of that yourself if you have that particular desire. Before we end up our odyssey here on the PCUSA's websites and official publications, I do want to show you a couple of documents related to some things I hope to have time to mention. That would be first the Kenyon case, which took place back in the 70s. Now, Wynn Kenyon is very well known to my particular congregation because the Kenyons are a family that still attend here at Gospel Fellowship PCA. Our church was one of the first PCA churches in the north, and the Ascension Presbytery was the first northern presbytery to come out of the main line and into the PCA. And the reason we did that is because there was a particular ordinand named Wynn Kenyon whose ordination was blocked by the mainline denomination. Now, back then it was called the UPCUSA, before it became the PCUSA in 1983. And originally the Pittsburgh Presbytery approved his ordination, but later on his ordination was overturned by the Permanent Judicial Commission. Why is that? Because he did not believe in the ordination of women. And he said that he would cooperate with a denomination that ordained women, but he himself could not ordain women. Now, again, originally his ordination went through, but later it was overturned by the PJC. And an official interpretation of the PJC is that if you hold that ordination should be for men only, that you cannot be ordained in the PCUSA, or back then it was the UPCUSA. So that was a landmark case called the Kenyon case. And when that happened, dozens of churches came out of the main line and began to run into denominations like the PCA, my denomination, later the EPC and ECO and so forth. So that's a pretty major moment. And I do want you to read more about this. This is an article on thisday.pcahistory.org. So you can just search Kenyon case, Kenyon case, and look for the story of how it is that traditional men who hold the biblical view of gender were barred from ordination in the main line. Finally, and we have to pair that story with this, I do want to cite the Caseman case, which happened a few years later. Now remember, Kenyon was barred from ordination because he did not believe that women should be ordained. But Caseman, a few years later, was ordained, and the PJC had to review this case because Caseman denied the deity of Christ repeatedly and also denied the bodily resurrection of Christ. And yet the PJC affirmed his ordination. Now, these two cases, the Kenyon case and the Caseman case, are often talked about in tandem because what happened there is that the PCUSA said, the mainline church said that you cannot hold the biblical view of gender in ordination and be ordained in the PCUSA, the mainline church, but you can hold that Christ is not divine, that Christ did not raise from the dead and be ordained in the PCUSA. So that just shows a little bit of the moral and doctrinal insanity of the mainline church, okay? Well, see, I already went 25 minutes there, and I was just showing the receipts for the case that I built in my debate with Redeemed Zoomer. So if the kids are not present and you don't have minors in the home, then get on the PCUSA website, go through many of their queer documents, their LGBTQIA plus advocacy documents, and see what you believe for yourself. Okay, don't just take it from me because I said so in the debate, but go back through all of these receipts and study the matter for yourself and ask yourself the question, were the founders of the PCA wise to leave this denomination back in the 70s? They could see the handwriting on the wall. They knew which trajectory this was going. Item after item, event after event was going the wrong way. The main line was breaking. It was a sinking ship, and the PCA founders were wise to get off and to found a newer, better, stronger denomination that's more consistent with Scripture and the Reformed confessions. Okay, that's it. Thanks so much for checking in. Do love you lots. Talk to you later.